Thanks for joining the session on Just Transition, which we've heard a lot about over the last couple of days, but never really taken the time to think about in isolation and really dive deeper into Just Transition. So just as a bit of background, a very momentous thing happened in July 2022 when the UN General Assembly unanimously voted to recognize that access to a clean and healthy, sustainable environment is a human right. So when we're talking about the challenges that climate change will bring to the global population, we see that it's deeply intertwined with global patterns of inequality. The poorest and most vulnerable people will bear the brunt of climate change. So obviously Africa is a very important continent in that regard. So, and the most vulnerable people are often also disproportionately impacted by the measures to address climate change. So when we think about the transition, a lot of the growth that is expected to happen comes from fossil fuels. So how do we do that in a just way? A just transition involves maximizing the social and economic opportunities of climate action while minimizing and carefully managing any challenges, creating decent work opportunities, and leaving no one behind. So in that sense, I would like to call on a wonderful panel today. First, Ruan Bestbier, famous for his last name, who's the group head of sustainability for Capricorn Group. Then we've got Herman Shilongo, who's the chief reinsurance officer for NamibRe. And also Harald Schütt, who is wearing multiple hats today as the founder of REIAoN, the managing director of Amusha Solar Namibia, and Hungileni Investments. Thank you. So I'd like to kick us off with a very quick tour de table, just asking about how you see just transition in the context of your own organization. Just in a minute to get us started, little challenge. Maybe Ron, if you can start us off.
All right, so I represent Capricorn Group, which is a very diverse and dynamic financial services organization, locally owned in Namibia. And has exposure to commercial banking industry, the microfinance or micro lending industry, the insurance, as well as telecommunications. So you can clearly see the significant role that we play in this transition to a low carbon and climate resilient economy. And we also have the ability to direct capital, services and products to companies and individuals that align to the Sustainable Development Goals, with a national development plan in order to ensure that this transition that will happen in all these industries that we are exposed to happens in a just manner. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. So I will represent and speak on behalf of Bank Windhoek, the commercial banking side, when we discuss this situation.
Brilliant. And then over to Herman.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to speak from the insurance or reinsurance perspective. So I represent NamibRe, which is the only reinsurance company in the country currently. So we provide a lot of backups towards projects that are actually happening in the country. So we actually have a chance to really affect a lot of changes in the way corporates actually devise their strategy. Thank you.
I'm excited to hear about the connections between you two then. And last but not least, Harald.
Thank you. Yeah, mine is very easy because the Renewable Energy Industry Association of Namibia, that's a mandate, that's the organization that mandated me to be here. We are here to guarantee quality. So if you as a consumer would like to have a solar system of whatever type, of whatever size, between very small household up to very big ones, the REIAoN, as we call it, Renewable Energy Industry Association of Namibia, has a code of conduct which obliges the members to deliver quality. You called me the founder. Actually, I'm only one of the many founders. We were quite a group of people who 15 years ago at the Habitat Center in Karutura started this organization, because our problem at that time was that the solar industry was gaining momentum, but there were a lot of fly-by-nights. And so they kind of cheated on their customers by charging high prices and delivering low quality. And that can really damage a market over a long time. So, and there was another task, and that was that up to then, the solar industry in Namibia was white and German and male. That was it. And we wanted it to be more, let's say, representing the diversity. And I must say we were quite successful. So we have 34 members now, and the quite number is not white and German and male.
That's great to hear. Can I maybe then stay with you and ask you in a little bit more detail how you achieved that? What solutions do you have to promote local participation in green renewable energy?
Now, of course, the interest of a business person is to do business. And the conditions in Namibia are very favorable and much more easier, like in comparison in Germany, for example, because Namibia on a national scale has 2.3 times more solar energy than, for example, Germany. That means also that if you invest 1,000, whatever, euros, dollars, or whatever you have, into a piece of equipment and you put it up in Germany, you get less than half of the energy out of it that you get in Namibia. That has nothing to do with the money. But so that makes it relatively easy. Secondly, only 48% of Namibians are on grid. That means 52% of Namibians do not have electricity. And we are a country of 824,000 square kilometers with only about 2.6 million inhabitants, which means that we have round about 3 people per square kilometer, meaning you have to stand on your tiptoes and see with whom you share your square kilometer. Whereas in Germany, you have 243, and in the Netherlands, 300 something, 64, I think, or so. So in Namibia, it is now a very, let's say, normal consideration. If you want to have electricity, do you go for grid or do you go for solar? And solar is always cheaper. I'm taking any challenge. Solar is always cheaper.
So from the perspective of Bank Windhoek, how do you see that then? When you hear that solar is cheaper, how are you including social aspects as well as renewable energy in your business decisions?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. And as providers of capital, it's crucial that we allocate capital to the right organizations and individuals. So one of the responses here is to see, to ensure that we have a evaluation criteria that we attach to all our loans and investments that we consider. So one of the examples we can use is when we, as a commercial bank, issued our first green bond in the market. We used a green bond framework to help us with the eligibility criteria and also the disclosure of the impact that we make through these investments. So it's important, and on top of that, we also have adopted the environmental social management system that was introduced by the International Finance Corporation that allows us to do positive and negative screening on our loans and investments. And that's not just on the environmental aspects, it's also on a social aspect. So incorporating and aligning to regionally and globally accepted standards, frameworks, and guidelines. As we've heard through these 2 days or yesterday, that there's a lot of complex regulatory frameworks and voluntary guidelines in the market. And it's crucial that you align with for the right reasons. Many of it's voluntary and not regulatory or mandatory in Namibia. So it's up to us as a provider of capital, a financier in this crucial aspect, or in this environment, to ensure that we don't focus only on improving environmental or reducing our environmental impact by the investments that we make, but also the social and governance aspects. Because it's crucial, and that we've seen in the market that a lot of organizations tend to focus on ESG, throwing around this environmental social governance acronym in the corporate sphere, but they tend to focus only on E, the environmental impact, and they neglect the social and governance aspect. And it's important to balance that factors. And the only way you do that is if you incorporate it into your strategy, your daily decision makings, and most importantly, your culture. Because if your culture adopts sustainability, they will change, your staff and also your external stakeholders will change their behavior. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, and we don't want this transition to a low carbon, climate resilient economy to happen. And there's someone that's left behind. But yeah, let's listen to the rest of them.
That's a great segue. Then, Herman, maybe you could shed a bit of light on how you see it from the perspective of the insurance industry, which probably battles very similar challenges to the banking industry in this context.
Thank you very much. We actually expecting to see more of an involvement of the insurance industry within the space in the coming years to come, definitely. Maybe just to take you a little bit back in history and in the current perspective on how insurance industry is actually being perceived outside, is that this is actually one of the industry that most probably people don't really know much. And it's always one of the industry that is always in the background. So when people are talking about fighting climate change, usually insurance industry will be the last one to register in their mind, if it ever register in their mind. So with that said, I don't blame them, definitely. And this is actually being, this can actually be seen from the statistics that there is a low penetration rate of insurance in Africa, per se. So coming back on how we actually foresee how the insurance industry will actually gonna try to assist the whole the business environment is by most probably backing up the business environment. So we like people like Harald. So they come in with capital, we back them up. So, and we like them because the ones who are driving this renewable energy sector, and we really want to back them up, back the investments more than backing up the co-producer. Most of the time we actually want all the co-producers now to move or to set up any, solar powers within the farms instead of coal and ban coals. So yeah.
Because there's one very important issue. The sun will never send you an invoice.
Well, so we're hearing there's a big market for renewable energy. There are green bonds emerging, and we've got insurers who are very keen for the capital to come their way to make sure that everyone is backed up. Why are we not seeing a bigger move in that direction? And maybe, Ruan, if I can throw that ball at you.
Yeah, that's a very valid observation as well, because, the cost of funding has always remained a challenge. Although there's mechanisms, innovative financial mechanisms like green and sustainability bonds that financial services use to issue a green and sustainability bond to raise additional sources of funding to finance environmentally friendly and also socioeconomically friendly projects. And the issue is that, the investors, although they are willing to invest in these type of financial mechanisms, they're still very yield conscious, especially in the dire economic conditions. An asset manager or a pension fund still needs to receive a decent return. So the challenge is to balance or to reduce the cost of funding of sustainable finance in order for us to pass on a lot more benefits to the borrowers, and to also to ensure that the regulators and also the public sector plays a big role to create a conducive environment for us to like they mentioned, Dr. Statler mentioned, that the ease of doing business is normally like looking at how many days it takes to register business, but you need to look at what is it required to remain open. So the question is, or the challenge is to balance the sustainable finance mechanisms with the cost of funding. We need to reduce the cost of funding in order to pass on the benefits, and then the social foundation or the social foundation in which we operate entrepreneurship is quite crucial, especially in a transition, because entrepreneurship creates jobs. And part of this, transition is to also focus on financial inclusion and financial literacy, because entrepreneurs cannot focus without that solid foundation of financial literacy, how to operate the business, how do I scale it, how do I create more jobs, how do I reduce my operational expenses. So it's a circular, it's a challenge. It's a really complex situation. You cannot just provide capital. You also need to do responsible lending. Because now financial service institutions can provide capital. There is a lot of capital, but you cannot disperse or allocate capital to companies or individuals that will be stringent to them to survive in terms of cash flows. So part of the finance must be that financial education part as well.
And how does the insurance industry relate to financial literacy? What's your role in that?
Wow, okay. we actually, insurance industry is more of a risk management kind of industry. And what people actually need to understand is that we provide risk management products. That's what we provide. So if Harald is having his farm, and of which he set up, let's say, some solar panels, and tomorrow the solar panels get, let's say, destroyed by a storm or something like that, and he's not insured, definitely that's actually a loss of his capital that he invested in there. So as an insurance industry, we actually comes in and say, okay, Harald, you worked hard for your capital. So how if we provide you with a backup to, in case anything happens to your to your solar panels, then we'll be able to reimburse you or to reinstate your assets. In that case, that's actually what we do. And this is actually what we also understand within the whole Namibian or African space, is that people don't really understand the role of the insurance sector. They don't really know what value does it really add. So you need to get into the market, start educating people, and you really need to start talking to people and for them to start making sense of the benefit of having an insurance. It's not just something that you spend money on the premium, like what most people say, you know what, I've been paying insurance on my house for 15 years, I've never claimed. The day that you're going to cancel it is probably the day that you're going to have have an event that you might actually regret, canceling it and so on. Or the day that you're going to cancel your car insurance is the day you're going to crash it and you have to start all over again. So that's what we usually do, is try to educate people of the need and importance of insurance.
So Harald, what do you and the people that you work with and try to empower need from commercial banks and insurers? What do you want to see from them?
Actually, let me tell you a little story. There's a continent of stories. I have to prepare, and I'm still a co-owner of a 5-megawatt plant at Orongo Cement. And it was a bit of a struggle about 5-6 years ago to get, all the ducks in a row and get this 5 megawatts. It's about 100 million Namibian dollars. That sounds a lot, but, I'm not rich, don't you worry. 1 year later, after financial close, the thing was already producing. By the way, we had one insurance claim for lightning, so thank you very much. I still got calls. I heard you have a project. Can we finance it? So money is actually one of the problems, and it is not the biggest problem that you have. The reason why Namibia has only or already 274 megawatts. I'll answer your question in a second. Let me just put some of these figures correct. The Namibian peak demand is 630 megawatts. That means all air conditions are running, all factories are working, then altogether pull 630 megawatts capacity. Now there's a difference between capacity and energy. Energy is capacity per time. A kilowatt hour is capacity. A kilowatt is capacity, and a kilowatt hour is energy. So that's important to know, because even ministers muddle that up and say, now we have so much capacity, but a capacity of coal-fired power gives you 24/7 as long as the thing runs. A capacity of solar power gives you between 6 and 9 hours a day. So we need by far more solar capacity to cover the same energy supply. Namibia has a capacity of round about 274 megawatts, which is quite a lot if you compare it to 630. I wrote an article that is called 100% renewable energy and energy efficiency plus storage in Namibia. It's a bit old, 2015, but the basic facts are still correct. We could easily, and I repeat easily, electrify the total Namibia from renewable sources. Now I'm answering your question. The obstacle are the regulations. We have an imported structure of energy supply, which is top-down. And again, if you allow me just 2 sentences why that is so, because it's a phenomenon all over the world. In the early stages of industrialization, there was no grid. Factories had a huge shaft that was going through the whole factory, turning around with a steam engine. And if you wanted to drill a hole, you had to put a belt on that belt and on that shaft and on your machine, and then you could something like this. Then Mr. Bosch and Mr. Siemens so reorganized the whole thing, and they made it electrical. And only then came big businessmen and said, now we want to generate electricity in one central place. And at that time, it was even awfully more expensive than it is today. Now they went to the banks and said, dear bank, would you please give me whatever, so and so many millions, I would like to start a power station. And the bank said, you may be a nice guy, but who tells me that not in 5 years somebody else comes and puts up another, maybe better, maybe faster, maybe more cost-efficient power station right next to you? So then the entrepreneurs went back to the government and said, government, I need a mandate, I need a license, which gives me exclusive rights to produce electricity at this place for this area. And they were granted that license. And then they went back to the banks and said, guys, now you can give me the money because there's no competition. And this tradition, this way of thinking has prevailed until today. And that's why also some of these big energy providers are so arrogant and so rich, because they just have to say, it costs us so and so much to generate and produce our electricity, and we send you an invoice. And when I'm playing now the role of an energy provider, when we send you an invoice, you have exactly 2 choices. Either you pay or you close shop. Or have you ever experienced that an energy supplier is asking you, is it okay if we increase by 10% or 5%? Could you absorb that? Are you all right? Something? They don't. They have a monopoly and you pay or you shut up. Renewable energy is technically very interesting, and I can entertain you for hours with the technology. But the most interesting part of it is it allows a bottom-up distribution. Everybody can have a bit of energy generation. And in Namibia, because of our lots of sunshine, it is very cost-effective. Now the question is, why is it not happening? The regulations are still in the mindset of this top-down pyramid. And those people who make our regulations and political decisions have not understood that it would be very beneficial to the entire economy, to the society, if we would change the regulations in such a way that generation is actually democratized all over, and the utilities would only be in charge of bundling and distributing and keeping up technical standards. That would make sense, and that would make a lot of money, billions.
So what we're hearing is regulation is both a hurdle at the stage of, at the level of a commercial bank of putting together bonds, but then also in the energy market. How would you then overcome some of these challenges? Not only the regulation, but maybe, Ruan, if I can throw the ball to you, how do you see the future of just transition evolving from the perspective of a commercial bank?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and there's no simple answer to that. It's a transition journey, and the thing is, normally in our experience, we finance a lot of climate mitigation projects, which Harald is referring to solar PV installation, rooftop solar installations, commercial size solar PV installations. But if you think about it, if they construct a 5 or 10 megawatt solar park, there's only a limited amount of jobs being created during the construction process. So after the solar panel is now up in operation, for example, then there's most probably 1 or 2 security guards looking after it and 1 or 2 people cleaning the panels. So it's not a long-term effect in terms of job creation. So, but yes, that's the one side of this coin. But I think one of the ways we can respond is to say, how can we look at climate adaptation projects, which we refer to now, that the impact is visible from day one, from the initial investment. It creates jobs, especially in the sustainable agriculture space. Is how we can support the sustainable agriculture space, which is also the largest employer in our country, at least, and I think in the rest of the world as well. So it's more about understanding the development needs in your country and trying to align your financing initiatives and also from your foundations in terms of corporate social responsibility. There's also some sponsorships that you can do and initiatives that you embark on from the foundation perspective that needs to align to either the SDGs. You cannot address everyone, all the SDGs. So prioritize certain SDGs and make sure that you have evidence to show that you actively contributed to it. So that takes me to another point I just wanted to mention, that we've heard through the last few hours and days that there's a lot of commitments being made from a transition to a net zero transition journey for your own operations by 2030, or a net zero transition journey for your finance emissions by 2050 or earlier. So there's a lot of bold and vague claims being made by especially financial service industries and high-emitting industries, especially like your fossil fuel-based companies. But like the EU, for example, now passed a law a few weeks ago where they regulate or require these statements to be verified by data, to make sure that this type of statements you make for marketing purposes, that you can actually state that you are making a difference. And if that type of regulation and alignment with standards allows us to walk the talk, and to ensure that you have data to back up what you are doing. And if you align with these, like for example, us, if you can give a practical example, we're signatories of the United Nations Global Compact. And there's 10 principles, and in those 10 principles speaks to human rights, labor, environment, and then anti-corruption. So if you align your signatory to that, or the principles of responsible banking, for example, it allows you to follow guidelines to ensure that you not only operationally, but also your future investments and loans that you disperse is allocated to the right projects, and also to make sure that the clients that you support, that they are ready for this just transition. Because we know there's a lot of capital that's being focused to this climate resilient and low carbon economy. But some of the developing countries like us, the population cannot keep up with that transition. And as we spoke this morning as well, the education perspective, the quality of education. Are we aligned with the 5th industrial revolution that's coming in terms of artificial intelligence? And how many jobs are artificial intelligence going to replace? So it's a very complex situation. You can clearly see there's no simple solution for that, but it's a collaborative, and we all share in the responsibility to address this.
And then maybe if I can move right to Herman and ask you the same question, how do you see the insurance industry playing a role in that?
We actually foreseeing a greater role that the insurance industry will be playing in the just transition. In that case is that, maybe just to go a little bit backward, is that insurance industry or insurance entities themselves in their nature, they don't really directly reduce emissions or so. It's actually the corporate world, or also known as the real economy, that actually drives that. So the company that generate powers, let's say for example in Namibia we're having NamPower. It's actually NamPower that produce electricity via coal. Hence, if there is any need to reduce carbon, it's actually NamPower that actually need to drive that. Insurance industry is just there to back it up. So with now the current pressure on most of these companies to reduce the carbon emissions, they actually need to come up with new innovative ways. And then the new innovative way might be, let's say, that NamPower need to use more renewable energy. Getting more energy from renewable resources like solar. So for them now to come up with this innovative idea, innovations comes with emerging risks. So for them as an investors, they will actually want to transfer those risks to someone. And mostly it's insurance companies that actually take up those kind of risks. So how the insurance companies can assist the corporate world is actually by collaborating with the real economy, which is the corporate entities, in devising long-term strategies that can actually curb in transiting into clean energy or into something that is actually quite good for climate change. So with that says, insurance industry can really assist the corporate world, let's say via their own underwriting policies or skills. They can also offer risk management advices and so on to them. And via underwriting, we can also say, okay, you know what? If NamPower, let's say, for example, is 90 or 100% depend on coal, on generating power from coal, I can actually give them an incentive, say, oh, you know what? You pay me premium of 20 million Namibian dollars. So if you are actually just to bring in the mix 15% within the next 10 or 5 years or 3 years of generating your power from clean energy, I'll actually give you 20% discount on your premium. So that is actually quite massive. That is almost 4 million Namibian dollar on the premium that they're saving. And over the long period of time, that means that money is actually going to be like seriously real money that they can use to invest. So, and we sit down with them. We actually listen to their strategy. What are their strategy for the next 10 or 15 years? Because you can't just shut down and say, oh, you know what, NamPower, I'm now a member of the Nairobi, I'm now a sign up with the Nairobi declarations whatsoever. I can't anymore insure you because you're using coal. You need to understand that these transitions actually takes time. And it takes time, it takes money. Sometimes NamPower probably just invested those money, let's say 5 years back, and they haven't even got their returns yet on those investments. So you need to give them time. And the more you give them time, you also need to give them incentives to transit in something cleaner. Okay.
So then really we're moving into a similar type of client engagement that commercial banks are also doing with their clients. So you're having similar discussions and asking them for transition plans, essentially. And I mean, Ruan, if I could just ask you maybe to respond to that a little bit, how do you see that when the insurance industry is having very similar conversations with probably the same clients in many cases, how do you see that then working collaboratively, or is that still working in two separate houses, as it were?
Yeah, and that's just the dark side of that is, you know, there's always a competition, and I think, but although it's not, you cannot sway away from being competitive, you know, because you still need to do good to do well, you know. But at this stage, I think there's a lot of initiatives that is overlapping, especially with this now, and based on this conversation, I sparked the idea of establishing a type of think tank of how we can collaborate. And the thing is, we need to continue to challenge the status quo and come up with innovative financial mechanisms to support this transition in a more affordable way. Because our capital structures are quite heavily reliant on equity and debt, which is relatively expensive. So if we can use the insurance industry and see if we can develop a type of facility or a product, especially if we want to venture into the climate mitigation or this as climate adaptation and sustainable agriculture, we can use this insurance industry to come up with a product that can de-risk some of our investments into that industry. So you can clearly see they are making money, we are making money, and we can contribute to that. You know, you must understand that a commercial bank is a regulated entity, and so an insurance industry as well. So you're fairly limited in terms of what you can, you know, produce and offer the market. And so I think public-private partnerships is crucial, because it's a shared responsibility, and the private sector cannot address all these challenges on its own. So yeah, I mean, it's something that we need to, like something like the Bankers Association, you need to start something with financial services industry as a whole, because there's a lot of synergies and collaborative opportunities that's being created during these discussions.
So you'll have a good time chatting about this in the coffee break later. Then maybe Harald, to you, a similar question. Where do you see the solutions lying? And I somewhat expect you to have a different answer to your colleagues on the panel.
In the meantime, I was thinking you can also hire me to go and advise them. You know, I have a lot of energy. Anyway, let me again try to be simple. I made the decision to invest in a PV system on my roof about 5 or 6 years ago. The first tranche I paid for was 54,000 Namibian dollars. And then you make yourself an Excel sheet and you have a 5 years time of amortization and how long time when you think you must replace your inverter and whatever. So it's kind of a business plan type. And I came to a tariff of $1.20. My tariff was at that time, I think, $1.30 something that I paid on the grid. So it made sense. Now, now my tariff is $146. It's going to be $182 from 1st of July. In the meantime, I bought an electrical car. By the way, it's standing outside. If any of you is interested, we can have a short test drive. And I increased my system to altogether 3.8 kilowatts, costing me altogether 65,000. My kilowatt price must be below 60 cents now. So why I'm telling you those figures is actually solar energy gets cheaper with time. As you pay off your system, it gets cheaper with time. Fossil energy or central grid-bound energy, have you ever experienced that your tariffs were going down? That they come and said, we can produce more efficiently now, it's cheaper. Is it okay with you if I reduce my tariff? Have you? Anybody? No. So an investment in renewable energy, if you do it right, I must also say there are some people who just miscalculate, you know, and then it becomes expensive. So renewable energy gets cheaper with time, and as I said before, the sun will not send you an invoice, whereas the central supplier does. One other aspect. We have a huge problem in Namibia with houses being repossessed. And if you take today's and yesterday's newspaper, this is not about weather. Look at this diagram. This is the repo rate. 1 bar is 1 year, how it has been increasing over time in Namibia. That means that even more people are losing their houses. And the banks are already sitting with, if I'm not mistaken, 2-point-something billion worth of houses that repossessed. It's an incredible amount. Now, a bank doesn't want to have houses. I mean, they repossess them because the owners of the house don't pay their mortgage. But what does a bank do with a house? You know, they have to sell it to somebody. But when that somebody who buys it again doesn't pay, you know, then they're between a rock and a hard place. So my proposal, you asked me for the way forward, is why do banks not consider to intervene at an early stage, and instead of taking away the house, which again makes a lot of cost for the sheriff and the legal system and what, you know, sometimes it's ridiculous how much that costs. Why do they not say, all right, we give you an extra loan to solarize your house? You first take a solar water heater. Solar water heaters are between 30 and 50% of the average electricity cost. Look at your own electricity bill at home. 30 to 50% is heating water. The rest is electric cooking and lights and what. So we solarize your house, and that makes immediate economic sense. I can give you the figures. If you are interested, you can always, I can measure your usage, and I can show you on an Excel sheet that it is always cheaper to solarize your house than to use public grid. And then the banks could finance, for example, an organization like REIAoN to help to increase our lobby work. We are doing quite a lot of work with ministries, with municipalities, with wherever we can, to make them understand that their old mindset to think we buy electricity cheap and we sell it expensive. That was, that was the business model. At independence of Namibia, they bought from South Africa for $8.50 and they sold for 8.5 cents, and they sold for 24. Which product do you have? Where you have a secured market and you have almost 300% or 200% markup. That was very nice. With this money, they cross-subsidized all other municipal services. But now that is not possible anymore. NamPower has outstanding 1.2 billion. And now government has forbidden them to switch off electricity to those non-payment people. I don't have to tell you, you are all experienced business people. The safest way of running a company into bankruptcy is to cut off their income stream. That's what happened to Eskom. But on the other hand, if you now go to those people or those municipalities who have not paid their bills and ask them, where's the money? They say, we don't have it. Don't have that money. So we are here between a very big rock and a very hard place. The only way out is to make sure that the bottom of the society gets more money in their pockets, so that they are able to pay for their services. And that will not happen. Simply take it for granted. It will not happen if we keep up this kind of top-down strategy. The only way is to use the billions of money that the sun sends us every day in form of wind, in form of sunshine, and many other technologies, like not go in the technical questions, but there is a lot of money in that, to channel that into the pockets of the ordinary people and the companies directly, so that they have a higher capacity to pay back their loans or to start new businesses. That's the way forward.
So we've had some very concrete proposals, both for the collaboration, if possible, between commercial banks and insurers to drive the just transition, but also how to really ensure that it's not done in a top-down way, but bottom-up way. I think at this stage, I'd quite like to open up the floor for questions, if we have any. Got a hand over there.
By the way, there will be no coffee break at this stage. We promised them one. Unfortunately, you'll have to revoke it.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I'm from the Namibian Youth on Renewable Energy. A lot of questions Alice already asked about it, so I only have one for now. How can, it's going for the reinsurance officer. You mentioned about a lot of Namibians not aware about the benefits. So how can you ensure that in the future Namibians are not only aware of the insurance, but understand its benefit? Thank you.
Short and sweet. Do we have another question from the floor? We do. What I love about the end of day 2, many of those who've not said one single public word yet are starting to speak up. These are great developments.
Thank you very much. The question goes to Harald. My understanding is that if I completely go off-grid, local authorities still have the power to charge me availability of electricity or a basic fee in terms of that. Can you just give me your comments in terms of that to see whether it's possible to completely go off-grid and just stay on solar per se? The other thing is that I was made to understand that the cost of capturing the solar is, or the power is fine, but storing it it's a costly exercise. Could you perhaps just enlighten me in terms of the cost of storing that power for later use, seeing that you talk about a 6-hour duration time limit that you have in terms of the usage of that solar power, and the cost of replacing those batteries, because mostly it's batteries that are being used, unless you have a different device or a different mechanism in order to store that. And what duration do you have for that battery or that alternative storing device or capability? Thank you. My name is Patrick Swartz. I'm a lecturer at the University of Namibia.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps one final question from the floor.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. My name is Walid Ali. I'm the head of sustainability at the Central Bank of Egypt. Well, actually, I'm not quite sure if it is a question, but where I'm coming from, there is a booming business right now, which is the recycle of the solar panels. Because most of the solar panels that we started decades, that's approximately, it takes 30 years to needs to be recycled. And it's now becoming a challenge about all this demand about recycling those. This might sound a bit advanced phase, but it's not. It's an issue that soon everybody will face. And my question goes to Harald. Do you have a kind of a set of plan for those, the long-term plans to have an idea about how the owners of the solar panels can recycle those? Because 30 years on the planet, the world is not a very long period of time. Thank you very much.
Maybe Herman, do you want to start?
Yes. Thank you for the question. It's actually quite a relevant question. Maybe just to address it from the Namibian perspective, I might actually say that we are a little bit more lucky, given our high penetration rate of about 10%. That's actually second biggest after South Africa in Africa. I think after that, the next one is about 2% or less than 2% in Africa on the penetration rate. So thanks actually to our banking regulatory system that is actually quite intact, whereby it requires mostly, let's say, for example, for each and every loan or any financial service that you actually require, it might require you to have a life cover. So by then already people start knowing about insurance. The insurance sector also in Namibia really does do a lot of consumer education in Namibia itself. So they go out in the market. They really invest heavily in educating the market in Namibia. Hence, it led into the higher penetration rate. From our side, as a reinsurance, we're working with the insurance industry, and we're also working with the banking industry, whereby we want to develop certain products. Let's say now we want to develop a product whereby we say, okay, we want people to move away from using fossil fuel driven car into most probably hybrids. Electric cars, kudos Harald for driving an electric car. But most probably, I think most of the people in the country are probably going to go for the hybrid. So it's better than the fossil fuel driven cars. So what we actually want to do is to partner up with the bank where we say, okay, if you are to finance a car that is a hybrid, we're probably going to give you a preferential rates in financing that car. And on top of that, from the insurance perspective, we'll probably also give you a preferential rate on premium, on your premium. So if I was supposed to charge you, let's say $2,000 per month on premium, I'll probably charge you maybe 1.1 or even less than 1,000. And in that case, that is how we actually promote the whole economy to get actually becoming greener and greener. And then before you know, the effect will actually become massive. And almost everyone will start driving a hybrid or full electric car. If you even go full electric, we might even ask you 500 Namibian dollars, which will really have a massive impact on the country. And these kind of things, it's not only us who are actually educating the market. The car dealers are also coming in, also stepping in to educate the market in that way. Insurance companies are coming in, the banks on the other side are doing it, and then the insurance on this side are also doing it, and then we're educating the market. Hope I answered your question.
And then Harald, over to you. And just as a little challenge for you, you've got 4 minutes.
Okay, I will do that. Let me, with your permission, start from that side because he was just talking about it. We are working on trying to get an assembly line for electrical cars to Namibia, and you might consider to make it even $400 for if the electric car is assembled in Namibia. To give you another figure, we have round about 80 electrical cars, fully electrical cars running now in Namibia. We have 2 commercial charging stations. I'm charging mine from my PV system on the roof, and there are 32 charging stations planned to be set up all over the country. If somebody wants to know more about that, it's one of my favorite subjects. All right, to the issue of grid connection or not. I pay between $300 to $400 a month more for being grid connected than for not being grid connected. And sometimes when I get very angry, I think about phoning City of Windhoek and tell them, next time you come, don't forget your side cutter and cut off those 2 wires and get lost. I have not done that until now because I do not want to support energy apartheid. We already have a water apartheid in this country, which is evident and which is dramatic. If everybody, it's a simple Excel sheet. It is not very complicated to figure out that it is cheaper to go off-grid. But then those people who are still remaining in the grid because they either do not have the capability of figuring that out or they wouldn't get a credit or something like this, they stay in the grid. For them, it would then become exponentially more expensive. That's why my efforts rather go in the direction of trying to reform the grid and make the people who run it understand that it is for everybody, also for them, more beneficial to change the structure of the grid to make better net metering conditions and to allow us to, for example, supply our neighbors with energy. That was that. The recycling of PV panels, you must tell me if that answered your question. Yeah, okay. The most cost-effective storage in the moment, if you look at the market as is, are lithium-ion batteries. Elon Musk has put out the energy wall and so on. So lithium-ion batteries are in the moment what is there. There are many other technical developments and they're very exciting, but they're too detailed for this forum. You can roughly, but please very roughly calculate that a stored kilowatt hour becomes double as expensive as a directly generated kilowatt hour. I always say, but again, don't nail me on that figure because cases are different. But you can say, you can roughly calculate 1 kilowatt hour PV in Namibia costs $1 and 1 kilowatt hour stored in Namibia costs $2. But it's very rough. It can also be 2.5 or 2.8. It depends on how much electricity you use, whether you have a timer on your deep freezer, when your swimming pool pump is running, and. So there are many factors, but I just want to give you kind of an idea where you sit. So
30-second warning.
Okay, the story about the recycling. The solar panel industry has developed rapidly over the last 2 decades. They are now making solar panels which use a fraction of all those, let's say, expensive and problematic to get hold of materials. There are even new types which are double as efficient as them now. The companies are coming to a stage where they think in a circular way. They produce panels which are also easy to recycle. So we can look forward to actually having panels which are very close to a circular set of economy. And those that you cannot recycle, you can still use them as walls, tables, furniture, roofs, roof plates, because they actually are watertight, I promise you. Maybe that's enough.
So at the next regional roundtable, we expect the tables to be made of solar panels.
Easy, very easy.
I would like to thank our panelists very much. Please join me in applauding them and catch them at the break afterwards.